Let's talk about the budget with Hannah Dewhirst, who's the head of campaigns from Positive Money. How are you feeling ahead of tomorrow, Hannah? What do you think the Chancellor should be focusing on?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Feeling quite apprehensive at the moment. There's a huge opportunity in front of Rachel Reeves at this point to really make some massive changes, including bringing a windfall tax on big bank profits. That's a huge opportunity she has to bring in over £14 billion and really hit those who have the broadest shoulders. So we're fingers crossed for that. But yeah, apprehensive.
We heard earlier from James Cleverly from the Tories, and he said actually those with the broadest shoulders are already taking a massive hit at the moment. And we've also heard this messaging that everybody in society will have to play their part because of the very little wriggle room that Rachel Reeves has in terms of her financial headroom.
I mean, when it comes to banks, that's just not true. So the previous government actually cut the surcharge on banks, so they're paying less tax than they were a few years ago. And also in the last few years, their profits have soared to record highs because of higher interest rates that us, the public, have facilitated either through higher interest and debt mortgage payments, but also because we've been covering losses that the Treasury has to cover for bank reserves at the Bank of England. So yeah, they've definitely got some broad shoulders and they would be a prime target for tax rises tomorrow.
Do you get the pickle that the Chancellor is in terms of how little space she has to work tomorrow?
Not really, because unfortunately we all voted for a big change last year, but this government just hasn't delivered. They've remained stuck in this doom loop of beliefs that they can cut their way to growth, and it's simply not working. We can look at the last 15 years and see that underinvestment has left our economy on its knees. What we need is some really strong, radical changes tomorrow to show whose side this government are really on and change this economic system to benefit ordinary people, not big banks and corporations.
She said, didn't she, that well, actually, it was the CBI that said yesterday they don't want death by 1,000 taxes, i.e. lots of little slices from everywhere. Be bold with one or two big measures. I know that the Treasury is not confirming anything. What do you think is nailed on to be heard tomorrow?
Well, one rumour that we hope will be true is the rolling back of the two-child benefit cap, because that's just something that is keeping hundreds of thousands of children locked in poverty, which is just appalling. We're one of the richest countries in the world, and that simply shouldn't be happening. And one way she could cover that policy change is a windfall tax on big banks, which we at Positive Money have calculated would bring in £14 billion alone from just the big four. So there's huge possibility there. But looking longer term, like, we need to see a more long-term vision. Like you've said, this shouldn't just be a piecemeal budget of, lots of different tiny things. We need to see proper long-term vision and radical changes to the economy.
What about that suggestion that actually it would have been breaking Labour's manifesto pledge, but if she had brought up income tax, that would have solved a lot of problems because it wouldn't have equated that much to an individual in comparison to what else might be on the table?
I mean, honestly, if the government does insist on raising taxes tomorrow, then they should raise taxes on, as I've said, those with the broadest shoulders, on big banks and corporations, by really tackling wealth. At the moment, wealth is taxed at a much lower rate than income. So any kind of changes to income tax would just hit those ordinary families, which just doesn't make sense. Like, yeah, as I've mentioned, by raising taxes on wealth, either via windfall tax on banks or equalising capital gains, or there's lots of opportunities and options on the table, and we just sadly are not seeing her consider those.
You will have heard the argument against what you're saying in terms of companies and individuals who do have wealth will just say, you know what, we're not going to be here in the UK. We'd rather go and base ourselves elsewhere because they employ a lot of people, and actually what they do is bring a lot of positivity to the UK economy. You've heard that argument lots of times. What do you say to that?
So that's one of the reasons why our windfall tax on banks proposal is focused on, retail banking, because everyone in the country has to have a deposit, and for your income to come in, and to have bank cards for your daily purchases or cash purchases. So there is no way that they can just leave, or if they do, we'll find an alternative. And I don't think anyone's going to cry if Barclays are suddenly raking in less money next year, or any of the other big banks.
So you're going to be keeping a close eye tomorrow, Hannah?
Absolutely. We'll be waiting with bated breath. I mean, we handed in a petition yesterday with over 68,000 names. You know, this is a policy that's hugely popular. There are many policies out there that are hugely popular, and we really hope that Rachel Reeves will listen to them tomorrow.
Well, let's maybe come back to you afterwards and get the debrief from you.
Yeah, that would be great.
Hannah, we appreciate your time as always. That is Hannah Dewhirst, Head of Campaigns from Positive Money. The time is 11:30.